Welcome to Sons of the Flag Radio. Tonight we have Task Force Director Chad Gruver, CEO President Ryan Birdman Parrott, and our guest tonight is Chief Scott Thompson of the Colony, and he will be talking about his new book, The Functional Fire Company. We'd like to start this program off by reading those names of those that we've lost in the fire service since our last episode. Michael Cherubini, Michael Goodnight, Cory Barr, Zachary Fazekas, Braden Varney, Nathan Flynn, Jeremy Stokes, Don R. Smith, Brian Hughes, Pasquale DiBenedetto, Barry Everett, Andrew Brake, Madison L. Clinton Jr., Matthew Burchett, Jeff Holden, Michael Reese, Daniel Lister, Eric Aarseth, David Fischer, and Robert J. Phillips II. May we take a moment of silence to honor these guys. And now, here's our guest speaker, Task Force Director Chad Gruver.
I'm sitting here today with Ryan Birdman Parrott, President of Sons of the Flag, and Chief Scott Thompson from the Colony Fire Department in Texas. Chief Scott Thompson has a book coming out called The Functional Fire Company, Positioning Small Groups for Success and Survival. It's coming out, a fire engineering book, correct?
Correct.
He is also teaching at the Chesapeake Fire Conference in Maryland on October 21st through the 23rd. He is a part of the leadership track with Captain Mike Dugan. Chief Thompson has been a firefighter. He started in October of 1981 at Texas A&M and has 33 years in the fire service. He's, like I said, currently the chief at the Colony. So, Chief, tell me how you got there. I know you've been in Plano. I've known you for 20 years, so I know when I met you, you were in Plano. So tell me a little bit about your career and how you started. What got you to the Colony?
Well, thanks for having me on, Chad. My dad wanted me to be an attorney and go to Syracuse, and I wasn't going to any part of that. Always wanted to be a firefighter. Went to college, went to fire school at the Texas A&M Teaks Fire School. And while I was down there, I went over and applied to the university and got accepted. The standards were a lot lower than to get into A&M. But I became a volunteer fireman while I was down there, and I went to A&M for several years, and they opened a new program in North Texas called Emergency Administration and Planning, more in line with what I wanted to do. So I transferred to Denton. As I was graduated in December of '85, and Plano was hiring, I started in Plano in January of '86, and that was my first department. Worked with Plano for about 10 years. And had the training's my passion, and had the opportunity to go to Arlington, Texas, as their one and only civilian training person, and went into Arlington for about a year, and I got recruited for the fire chief's position in Athens, Texas. And I was too young, too dumb to know what that involved, but I thought, hey, what the heck? It's a beautiful place to live and raise my kids. So went down to Athens. Was one of the youngest fire chiefs in the state. Didn't know how much I didn't know at the time. Came back to Lake Cities. I was recruited to take a volunteer department to career department in Lake Cities, which is Corinth, Shady Shores, Hickory Creek, and Lake Dallas, and did that. And then one of my mentors, Rick Lasky, came to Louisville. I'm not quite done yet. And Lasky, we were having coffee and asked if anybody, if you knew anybody was interested in his training job. And I said, hey, I love training. So I actually went from a fire chief back down to division chief of training. Spent 10 years in Louisville and was going to retire and write a book, and the Colony job came open, and it was probably one of the best career decisions that I have made. So that's how I ended up in the Colony, kind of the long way, and love it there. Got a great group of guys, and having some fun times.
For those that are listening around the country, the Colony is a little suburb north of Dallas, and among the firemen, I'm probably going to step on some toes here. They're kind of considered the elite. These guys train every day, and it's where the firemen want to go work. So you've done a great job there.
Well, thank you.
This book, The Functional Fire Company, I haven't got to read all of it yet. What I've read is excellent. tell me, I know you worked your whole career on it. What made you write this book? Why is this book so important?
Well, three things. Number one, a lot of people taught me a lot of things and invested in me, and I believe in paying it forward. So the primary motivation for this book, and I have 2 sons on the job, was to take all those things that were taught to me from fire departments all over the country and some great firemen, and put that down so that it can go forward and for future generations. The second was I was thinking about advancing my education. And I thought, okay, I can go get my master's degree and read other people's books and write papers for professors. And I thought, well, why don't I just do the research myself and write a book on it? And so I chose that. I'm an EFO dropout after year number 1. So this was my alternate route to get my my advanced education. And then the third reason I did it is I think the American Fire Service is doing very well. I think we really screwed up the local level, and I have some real concerns with my fire service. And like I say, my sons are in it, so I have a vested interest in the future, and there were some things that I felt needed to be said. And so I wrote a book and said them.
Very good. Very good. Birdman, what Chief Thompson is doing, from what I've talked to you, is he pushes the elite. He strives for the best. At any time, if you want to comment on how this applies from what you went through and how you prepare for success in the SEALs.
Yeah, so I applaud Chief Thompson on what he's doing here, especially with his book, but it's not just about the book, it's about what he does on a daily basis to execute, to make sure that our future generations are taking it a standard above us. And that's the biggest thing. I think we've talked offline about this, and we see eye to eye on what we believe and where we see our future generations need to go with our service. In the SEAL teams, is the same thing. You train your people to be better than you from day one. It's a peer evaluation type standard procedure. Same thing in the fire service. If you're not doing the job to the best of your ability, you're going to get known real quick that you're not standing up or meeting that measure or that level. But then there's also way more to be able to do. We talked about you should never be sitting around with nothing to do. There's always work to be done around the firehouse. I'm speaking as a non-fireman. In the SEAL teams, it's the same thing. There's always work to be done, and if there's something that doesn't fall within your purview, then you go pick up the slack somewhere else, or you go help somebody else with that job, just to make sure that the job is completely executed, finalized. So I'm really interested. I have not got my hands on the book yet, but I'm really interested to read the book, to understand the dynamic of what is in there. But it's important. The words that he's going to share, like he said, mentors are everything, and usually when legacy people put out information, that's not just for the next generation, that's for all military, for the greater good, because there are very few legacy people out there. And then 2, to continue on for our next generation so that all the hard work, sweat, and tears that you put into this job will continue on and only grow, that it doesn't fall apart. So, and I see that disruption in America completely around the block. It's not just military, it's not fire service, it is the whole approach to how we're moving into the next generation. There's a lot of entitlement, there's a lot of laziness, there's not accountability, there's a lot of things that really need to be addressed, and the only way to do it is to continually harp on it, push on it, and change it.
Chief Thompson, one of the things you've done so well at the colony, and I think a lot of fire departments have, we talk about tradition, and we want to keep our traditions alive. You talk about culture, and you believe that culture management is the future of the fire service success. So why should fire officers, no matter what level they are, fire chief, captain, lieutenant, be focused on the organization of culture and the subculture at the fire station?
Well, I think the first thing is you really got to understand what culture is, and a lot of people use culture kind of as an excuse. Well, the culture didn't allow me to do this or that, but really the culture influences everything we do, and we create the culture. The formal and the informal leaders, the small unit determines the subculture. To me, and there are several minds who've written about this, that'll tell you culture is more important than the vision, it's more important than strategic plan, because culture influences everything. If you have an extreme safety culture, if you have a culture of EMS or whatever that is, it influences everything we do. And the reason why it's important at every level, and we see these with specialty teams, and I'm sure With the SEALs, I know with the special operations in Chicago and New York and those companies, they have a subculture that they create, and it brings the team together and it gives them a common goal, and it's above them. The culture is really something that defines us. It's not only the artifacts and the things that we personally value, but it's how we go about and we externalize and internalize with ourselves and our community. So it impacts absolutely everything. And the American Fire Service is a macro culture, and we all see parts of that in our organization with our rank structure and our apparatus. And then there's the organizational culture, which is going to look a little different in each fire department. But then below that, you have your subcultures, your fire companies, your specialty teams, even supervisors have a subculture. And then you have your micro cultures, which is that core unit, that small group that comes together for a common cause and the commitment to duty. So each one of those levels, I think, is essential. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and I've never been in an officer's class where culture has been talked about. And one of my responsibilities as a fire chief, and I say this all the time, is to manage the culture daily. That's one of the most important things I do, is to make sure we're hitting on all cylinders. And I look for signs that things may be going bad before they become institutional problems. So to me, I say, don't neglect the culture, not even for a day.
Very good, and I think you just answered my next question. Who is responsible for managing the culture? I know you say you as the fire chief are responsible, and if you neglect it, it can go bad quickly. But
everybody. You know, everybody has a role in it, because the culture influences everything that people do. Everything that people does influences the culture. So it's a give and take thing. And once you start neglecting the culture, you stop going forward and we have two choices. We can accept the culture that's there and hope it's good, or we can have a chosen culture and work towards that every day with our values and our vision and our standards. And that's what we opted to do in the colony. We call it a chosen learning culture. And from myself all the way down to the junior firefighter, they have a role in maintaining that culture. And that's the only way you can get it to work.
And I'm going to ask you a question about, I guess, the subcultures, as you call them, the small groups. And the colony is very successful with this. How does culture impact the engine or the truck?
It impacts them the most.
Okay.
The everything, and I think Ryan, you'll agree with me on the military. The small groups determine the success of the whole. Without success at the small group, whether it's a 2-person engine company, a 3-person, 5, 6-person engine company, that team carries out the mission. They have the most public contact. They are how we are evaluated in the fire service. The performance of the fire company determines the success of the whole. So your formal and your informal leaders in those groups, the way that they approach business every day, starting at the roll call, making sure that our vision for success is clear, that our commitment to duty is clear. You know, this whole us versus them thing, that's part of the culture. The culture of a fire department is either going to value us worrying about ourselves, or it's going to be our commitment to duty where we go take care of them. And I think that's where the biggest problem right now we're having in the fire service is our culture is not clear on what our priorities are, and the culture being the things that we value.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, the big thing is taking it back to the basics and realizing two things twofold. One, when you're at the basic level, it's what is the job, what are you required to do at the job? I mean, that's number one, is what is the baseline of the job? And then two, what are you required to do for the job? And so there's a standard to be a firefighter, there's a standard to be a Navy SEAL, there's a standard to be each one of these departments or these service branches or units. But then there's also a standard of what you are supposed to perform within this standard. So we like to think about it as there's an exceptional standard within the special warfare community, and then it's my job as an operator to crush that standard. And if everybody's thinking that same way, then you're gonna continually get better. But the second that you start relaxing that and saying, well, I just need to do the standard, well, then that gets known pretty quickly. But you got to be very careful of that. You have to be very diligent on where you're at and how much you want to move it forward. And that's the thing I like about small unit operations, because you get to know everybody really quickly. You get to know their movements. It's what I say, we're really good in the teams and the SEAL teams of being able to identify where they're going to go, how they're going to move, what they're going to think. Because we eat together, we live together, we fight together, we do everything together. Same thing in the fire service. Y'all do everything the same, just a little bit different of an enemy. But at the same time, it's that culture, that environment that we create. We call ourselves the sled dogs. So the sled dogs are the guys that drive the train. They're really the ones who are actually running the show day to day, making it happen. And that's where the culture really comes from. And then there's that leader who's holding the line saying, mush, 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 that's calling out good word. We got to do this, we got to do this. And executing. But it's the sled dogs that really adapt and they mold and bond, and that's really where it starts, and it should continue to go from. But like Chief said, you got to continually stay on top of it to make sure. I remember, a story of my Master Chief who used to walk in the room at the SEAL Command, and the one question he'd always ask was, he'd kick all the officers out of the room, which is kind of funny being an enlisted guy. But this guy was a legacy guy. He had that history, that background, and that legacy. But he'd step everybody out of the room except for the E-dogs, or the enlisted dogs, or what we call the sled dogs. And he'd just ask one question: how's morale? And that was a huge thing for us to know, that our hierarchy was just wanting to know, how's the morale? What's going on around the community? Are we happy? Are we satisfied? Are we getting what we need? Are we doing what we say we're going to do? What do you need? And that's the thing. That's the time for you to step up and say, well, you know what, Chief, it'd be really cool if we had, a couple more fire hoses, or this rig's really not working out, or for us, we need more weapons, we need more ammo, or we need more training for this, whatever. And if you ask for things in the right manner that you absolutely need, you should get them. And I guarantee your leadership will go to bat for you if you're asking for things that will help you execute your job to the best of your ability. And if they don't, then there's a huge problem there. But if you don't ask, then you're never going to get what you absolutely need. So it's a big thing for your leaders to always make sure they're checking on the morale, to make sure that the boys are good, or just in general, your firefighters are good. But at the same time, it starts at the bottom rung. The newest person on the team, who's the weakest link on the team, who doesn't know anything, to step up and say, okay, this is what I think we need to execute better, or I don't feel like I'm equipped enough to be doing what you're asking me to do, so I need more training. Would you help me with this? Stand up, be a man or a woman, execute, make the job happen, and then you form your relationships, your bond, and you go execute.
I think you bring up a great point, and I think fire chiefs can learn a lesson there. We exist to take care of that small unit, the fire company. That is my job day in and day out, is to create an environment where those who choose to meet the standard, and we got to have standards, to create that environment for success and survival for those who buy in and give it 110%. And there's really not anything more important than that. The way I look at it as a fire chief is to listen to those things, check the morale, check the climate, check the culture, and make sure that you're letting firemen be firemen and doing the things that they love to do. And if you take care of them, they're going to go out and take care of the folks that count on us for service. And that's kind of how it should work.
That's right. I mean, communication is a big principle, and it's a big problem within any industry. Even with corporate America, communication up and down the chain of command is always one thing that needs to be flushed out all the time. And if you don't have good lines of communication, then you're obviously going to have failure points here and there. But the other side to it is you have to want to do the job. You have to want to do the work, and you have to love the work. 90% of the time in any industry, in any company, in any service branch, the work sucks, right? It's not the stuff that you write books about. It's not the stuff that you tell stories about. But that's the real morale booster. When the stuff's rough, when the stuff sucks and it's deep and it's not fun and it's not sexy, that's what makes you who you are. That's your standard right there. So if you don't love the work, then you're in the wrong job. But then when you're in that job and you do love the work, can you take it to a new level? And the answer is yes. But are you willing to do it? So that's another thing that each person has to internally ask themselves on a constant basis is, where can I go from here to make myself better? And if you're making yourself better, then the person right next to you will see that, and they will end up, just by association, making themselves better. That creates more culture.
Chief, I know you said that you're going to make some friends with this one. The colony removed the word safe from all procedures and operating guidelines, and they replaced safe with smart. What was behind that?
Well, and I looked for a long time for a way to put it into words, and most recently, I think if you look at Mike Rowe, he did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and Mike Rowe talks about making safety third. But if you think about it, we do an extremely dangerous job, and I'm all for taking care of my folks, and I think any one of my firemen will tell you we're all in when it comes to equipment, training, policies, and practices, but we're out there to do an extremely dangerous job. And I haven't found a way yet to teach a firefighter how to safely vertical vent, or how to safely do an aggressive search, or how to safely do a vent enter search. We can make it less dangerous, we can make it safer, but we can never make it safe. And so I wanted a way to come at the organization with our leadership team of retraining our firefighters on how to evaluate safe. So we put SMART in there, and being SMART has to do with identifying and managing risks, being a risk manager all the time. If we have our guys showing up and instead of thinking, how do we do this safely, we get them to aggressively identify what the risks are, because they're there on every incident, and then how to manage those while still delivering a high level of service. And so that's what we've done, and we've had great success. If nothing else, it caused all of our folks to look at our operations differently. Now, we have riding assignments, we have pre-arrival assignments, that's all part of being SMART. We believe in developing, and I'm going to use the word experts, but getting people very good, deliberate practice, mental imagery, all these things that work in the military, in professional athletics, apply to the fire service. And I think a lot of our line of duty deaths are firehouse line of duty deaths because our people are not mentally, physically, mechanically, and procedurally prepared to go out and do the job. You can't have somebody who hasn't cut a roof in the last 5 years, order them to the roof and expect them to be successful. It just doesn't work that way. So by being SMART, we're being safe, and we're also taking it to the next level and aggressively identifying and managing risks to achieve our outcomes.
Let me touch on that for a second, because it's, absolutely on point with, the twofold of my life. So in the service, in the military, you have what you call hazard duty pay. So inherently, you cannot mitigate all risk. You can't do it, okay? There's Murphy's Law, right? Murphy's always around, and things always fall apart, and you have to jump to your contingency plans. That's what we do in any service, is we always focus on training, so we get to the contingency point, and we become well-rounded experts, close to experts, in those fields. But you can never squash that. I deal on a constant basis at Sons of the Flag with burn, veteran, and first responders. So when the safety goes out the window because things happen, and then you have this ultra injury like burns and burn care, and the fact that we're so far behind in burn care, that's a real problem right there. So the whole deal on safety is burns will always happen. No matter what, accidents always happen. No matter how safe you are, no matter how smart you try to be, or what they call, your basic or your conservative way of going about things, we're hard-charged people who are born to do these kind of jobs. And so we're willing to take the risks for the greater outcome, because you're going to put yourself aside. If somebody's in that room and they're burning alive, or they're screaming, or they need to get out of there, you drop all that safety stuff so you can go fix or save them. And so I think what you're saying is on point, absolutely. And I see this all the time. I mean, it's constant, and we're never going to stop these injuries from happening. So being able to be smart about how you're training, which is what we always like to do. We're very conservative in our training, but we're very smart and diligent of our training, so we can have the best overall outcome. But you always know that there are going to things that are going to fall apart, and we're going to have to deviate on the fly. And so I love it. I love the idea.
And I think it's almost hypocritical to talk safety, and if you're not out there performing quality training every day, mastering the basics, learning at the technique level, not just the strategy and tactics, but at the technique level, you're not doing the most important thing. The most important action step for being safe is being prepared. And that comes through mental and physical preparedness, comes through training, getting the mind right, getting the body right. So that's to me is the number one commitment. It's not a policy that says be safe. It's getting your people to think through the mission, be problem solvers on the fly. And here's an interesting stat for you. For the last 5 years, during our interviews, we ask new firefighters if they're willing to take risk. And we give them a scenario, and we paint a picture, and we say, okay, you're going to save a life, but there's a high probability that you will be injured. Are you willing to accept that risk? And 3 out of 10, 30% say no. Now, can you imagine if I allow those people into my organization? Somebody's coming in to be a firefighter, a fire rescuer, and they're not. I'm not talking about kamikaze missions or dying for a building. I'm talking about somebody who comes to work every morning mentally and physically prepared to do what it takes to carry out the mission and protect those who pay us to protect them. That's all. Like I say, we are very risk management oriented. The best equipment, the best training, the best tool, the best supervision. But imagine that, a firefighter who's not willing to take risks.
Now, I started in the 90s. I don't think it was like that. I don't know if anybody was getting a percentage like that. Why do you think that's happened?
Wow, we probably don't have time for that. I think what we've done is we've drifted so far from duty and the mission we forget why we're there, and I don't think we understand the responsibility that we have. And that's seen in fire departments all across the country. Why should the people that live in an Engine 1's district have a better chance of surviving than those that live in Engine 10's district? Because Engine 1 is more prepared because they train and they're well led. And that's not providing a fair service to our community. If Battalion 1's group is better than Battalion 3's, we need to deliver, and that comes from standards, going out and deliver a service that if nothing else, we're going to provide hope. The fire service, the military, one of the few things where you can do everything right and people still get killed and property still lost. But we should at least be able to provide hope by going out and putting our best team on the field. We like to say we're professional firefighters. Well, we need to compete with fire at a professional level. What does that look like?
I mean, here's the competition thing for us. I got a buddy of mine who actually was my leader in the teams, and this guy used to drill on me all the time, like, you're never going to be better than me. And, of course, what does that make you do? That can either make you cower, but we're not those type of people. We want to beat them. I want to beat him because I just want the internal feeling of myself saying, yeah, I smoked him on that run. And so we do these drills where we shoot guns, right? It's good stuff. And so we're on the shooting range and we're shooting guns and we load it up and then we're like, okay, let's do a round of or a volley of fire, see who's closer to the target. We go through it. My buddy beats me. He's got more time on the job. He's done this before. He's more of an expert than I am. Not good enough. Load it up again. We're going to do it again. And then we shoot again, and he beats me again. No, load it up again. We do it again, and 5, 6, 7 iterations in, and he's still smoking me. And finally, I was like, absolutely not. Load it up again. We load it. And probably 10 to 12 shots into it or iterations of it, I finally beat him. And then he immediately turns to me and says, negative, load it up again. Because now he wants to beat me again. And that right there is taking a standard and absolutely destroying it. And now what happens off that? The people who are somewhat experts or experts become even better. So they're not necessarily experts, but they're only trying to achieve becoming an expert. And then the people who are not even close to being experts just grew to becoming close to an expert. But it continually makes you grow as an operator, a firefighter, whatever you are doing. So it has to be, and that competition is everything. If you lose competition in life, get out of the job you're in, especially if it's having to deal with saving others' lives, because that's the only thing that's going to make you better, is having that competitive edge in a good nature to want to be the best you can. And if you try to become the best you can, you'll probably blow everybody else out of the water. But every now and then you're going to find that fluke person who is born to be the warrior. That's the thing I say all the time. There's two types of people in this world that I want to work with. There's the warriors and the doers. Warriors were born to be warriors. They're the people you know when you walk around, you see them, you're like, that dude right there is a Viking. Okay, that dude was born to do great things. Or woman, whatever. Born to do great things. They're just fierce. They know the job, and that's what they're supposed to do for the rest of their life. And then there's the doers, what I consider myself, as a guy who wasn't born to do that specific job. I'm no warrior, I'm no hero, I'm none of that stuff. But what I do is I work my absolute ass off every chance I get to be better, just to be like some of those people. And there's a lot of doers out there in the country that, and in the world for that matter, that want to do better and want to be better. So you team up with those warriors and learn a lot because they're always going to teach some. You always work with the doers because they're going to motivate you to do the better, the greater good, to be exceptional at your job. So,
see, and I think one of the problems we have in the fire service is that there's fire service leaders out there who believe having standards are too aggressive. We have fire departments that don't even have standards. That it's go in and it's kind of make it through the day. And we've made aggression a bad word. And when I say aggressive, I've talked about identifying and aggressively addressing problems with the resources that were given to us by our community. I can never understand these fire departments who have millions and millions of dollars of firefighting and fire rescue capability, yet they throttle it down so that on a fire scene, they only use 10% of that. You know, every time I want to increase my capability, a new fire station, new firefighters, I have to go to the council and I have to get approval. I should be held to the same accountability when I want to reduce that. Okay, you've given me all that, now we're going to throttle it down. We're not going to let our firefighters perform at a professional level. We're going to go back to JV or even Sandlot. But if you don't have standards, I mean, if you don't even start there, what do you work for every day? What does success look like? And how do you determine your wins and losses? And if you can't do that, how do you communicate value to your citizens? I communicate value to the citizens of the colony by talking about our capabilities and what we are able to do for them each and every day, no matter where you are in the city.
Well, there's so much that, I mean, I was talking to one of our task force leaders, and for those of you listening who don't know what a task force leader is, for Sons of the Flag, we have a huge network of volunteers that are called task force leaders that run basically their state for Sons of the Flag. They're the local boots on the ground. All of them right now are firefighters. Some have a past background in the military as well. But they all stand to alert us when somebody's been burned. Go make comms with the burn unit in their area to find out what's latest and greatest and what we can help them with. And then also host events so that we can get our exposure, our name out there so that we know when somebody gets injured and then they know we exist so we can help them. So we got all these task force leaders and they're all volunteer. And you think about that, when you look at our website, sonsoftheflag.org, and you see these task force leaders on there, they're doing above and beyond the standard, right? Because on their off time, they could go get a second job or they could go sit at home, but they're stepping into another role on top of it that's only benefiting the fire service and our veterans, and particularly burn survivors in general. But they're going out of their way to do something because they felt called to step up and do something greater. And I always take it back to the basics. You know, you go to work every single day and there's always work to be done. I am not an expert in as a SEAL. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. I have, lost a lot of that knowledge. I'm not current in it, so I'm not an expert in any of that stuff, even though people say the word SEAL and then they're like, wow, he's best shooter in the world, best fighter in the world. And it's like, okay, I'm none of that, right? But at the same time, I know how to do Excel spreadsheets now because of what I do. Yeah, not the funnest thing in the world, but at the same time, check it out. It's a whole new thing I learned that's making me better at my job. And so I'm not saying that all firefighters need to go when they're sitting around and the latrines are clean and everything is lickety-split and there's not a fire on the job that you need to hop online and get on your Excel spreadsheet and kick some ass. You can totally do that. But at the same time, there's so many things to learn to be better. Why in the hell wouldn't you do that? And I harp upon this all the time. See, we rely on our volunteers and our task force leaders to make Sons of the Flag whole. If for any reason they decided that Sons of the Flag was not worthy anymore, we would fall apart. And that's not a bad business plan. This is a charity. But we rely on people to step above their normal day and do something exceptional, which is what we joined the service for. You didn't join because you wanted to rescue cats out of a tree, which is the most common misconception of the fire service, is that, yes, y'all do humanitarian things to help people, which is awesome. But the real brunt of the job is when you get into it. I joined the SEALs because I thought it was really cool. I thought, wow, this is cool literature I read on it. But it was absolutely nothing like what I read about. It was different, but there was a culture. And when I got into the culture, I realized the job was completely different. And then the work for me was easy because it was so what I wanted to do. But I was willing to go extra to learn that stuff because I knew I was so far behind everybody else. And this really needs to be impressed upon the new people coming in, and it's only the older people who have been serving in that job for a period of time that can step up to do that. So if you want to make your fire service better, you've got to, as a leader, step up and say, I'm going to take time out of my day to make sure everybody else knows what the mission really is, why did you really join, and are you fulfilling that, and are there gaps that we can do or we can work together to make this thing better?
Very good, Birdman. I know at Sons of the Flag, and we've talked about this, the fire service is normally we're reactive. We're not proactive enough. And one of the reasons that we have Chief Thompson here and learning about, how to make a functioning fire company is I'm trying to be proactive. And that's why we get involved in these training events. Because in our eyes, if I can teach, burns are going to happen, Murphy's going to be with us, no matter if you do everything right, accidents happen. But the way we look at it is if we can provide better training for firefighters and give them exposure to better training, we are being proactive because we're preventing them from hopefully incurring a burn. You talked about quality training, and I've talked to some of your officers. Y'all focus on 5 things, if I'm not mistaken. You call it the 5 basics, and if you can get that right,
Basic Big 5.
yeah, the basic Big 5. Y'all even have something called spring training to go along with baseball. Can you tell me a little bit about the Big 5 and what that relates to a fire scene?
Sure, it's the full title is the Quarterly Basic Big 5, and if you learn the science behind skill and knowledge, after 90 days you start to lose it. So to stay proficient, you've got to exercise these things regularly. We call it the difference between rehearsing and drilling. But our Big 5 are hose, ladders, search, personal protective equipment, and then firefighter safety and survival skills. And that makes up our training, quality training priorities. We did the same thing in Louisville. We had the Quarterly Big 5. So we figure if we can get really, really good at those things, and then we have another drill called the first 5 minutes, which is really the first 15 minutes, but that's Chief Brunacini used to say the first 5 minutes will determine the next 5 hours. If we can master those basic Quarterly Big 5 and get really good at the first 15 to 30 minutes of an incident, then we're starting off in the best position that we can be in. And things that usually start good tend to stay good. We know that things start bad, stay bad. So that's our commitment to the basics. And I've had officers that have been with us for a very long time who've come up to me and they've seen it mature over years and say, Chief, our success is coming from our commitment to the basics. And that's where the basic Big 5 comes from. So quarterly, we're doing some kind, more often, but at least we're doing those kind of drills, and we're pulling a lot of hose, we're throwing a lot of ladders, we're forcing a lot of doors, we're practicing search out at the yard. That's our drill field. It's not big enough to be a drill field, so we call it a yard. But that's what we do every day, and it's become part of our culture, and our department values quality training.
You talked about your officers because they have to be a big part of this. And you say that all officers are either effective supervisors or courageous leaders. Why differentiate between these two?
Well, leadership is very important, okay? But I think we turn leadership almost into a burden in the fire service. We want everybody to mature and practice leadership and become very successful leaders. But you have to be an effective supervisor. That's your job. So as we're bringing this next generation of officers up in the fire service, we have to teach them to be effective supervisors, how to communicate expectations, how to hold people accountable, how to run the firehouse business of doing the administrative things that you have to do, this whole SMART concept. They cannot be in that role if they cannot be effective supervisors. Then through mentoring, a very aggressive mentoring program, and a learning culture, we develop them into leaders, and we add courageous leaders because we want to get them to the point where they have the courage to get firefighters out of the recliner and out training and to meet that standard. And you got to be pretty courageous in the firehouse. Unfortunately, officers sometimes take the path of least resistance, and they don't want to be the unpopular guy in that firehouse, so they'll lower themselves to the least common denominator instead of bringing the company up. So we have those two phrases, and you start out as an effective supervisor doing the things that you have to do as part of that job description, and then through mentoring we want to develop you into that courageous leader, and then the next step is a functional leader who allow others to lead while they're in a leadership role, and that's how we mentor and develop that next level of leaders. And if we miss that, to me, mentoring is the future of the fire service. The departments that embrace mentoring and where they can connect and commit to people on a personal, emotional level, they're the ones that are going to find success. The ones that don't embrace mentoring, I think, are going to have some real challenges with this next generation of fire officers.
You know, one of the things I've heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard the colony hadn't had anybody leave in 10 years.
No, 10 years, other than retirements and firings, and we're one of the lower paid departments. Nobody's left to go anywhere else. And the thing that impresses me more, I guess, that I'm more proud of is we've got firefighters coming from other organizations. They're taking a cut in pay, and they're giving up seniority because they want to be a part of the team. And I think, I know that there's 5 reasons why they want to do that. Number one, they want to train every day. The generation in the fire service now wants to train, and they value training. They like the fact that we respect the good traditions of the fire service. There are some bad traditions, but we respect the good ones. They like the way they do things. They believe in the engine and truck deployment model because it allows them, it positions them for success with this smart operational philosophy of putting them in a position to be successful. They see there's some potential for growth. I mean, we're a growing community. And then a lot of them will just say, like the way you do things. They like the way that we approach the job. So we ask everybody who comes into our organization why they're coming, and the reason why I believe they stay, and it's all culture. It's all how we allow firefighters to be firefighters. And when you do that, great things happen. And there are going to be people out there thinking right away, well, what about the paramedic side? We just switched medical control, went to Medical Center Plano, which has very high standards. We measure our paramedics monthly on 29 metrics, and our paramedics are as good as any in the system. So you're getting a group of people who want to do good in everything they do. We have a very a fire first culture, but we're seeing great benefits on the paramedic side. So again, it just goes back to where we kind of started. When you get that chosen culture in place and people embrace that, they want to be a part of that, and they'll do great things. And I think that's the strongest argument there is for culture, is people want to be there and nobody's leaving. And it's hard to find, I think, a fire department in the Metroplex where somebody hasn't left to go somewhere else with everybody, the pay going up and the growth. I think that, and it has a lot to do with our officers. It's our first level supervisors who make it work day to day.
It does speak a lot for your culture and your philosophy. Chief, tell me, what is the power of day one?
Well, when you talk about expectations, we put a lot of emphasis on this, and rather it's somebody coming to our organization, somebody getting promoted, somebody getting a transfer. We want our supervisors, our company officers, to position to where they have very clear expectations. If you don't have a clear vision of success, you can't be successful, because you have to work towards something. You develop standards around those, and you tell stories about that. So the power at day one is where we hit the reset button. And somebody who's maybe struggling or is gotten in with a bad group or whatever the scenario is, we bring them in and we reestablish the expectations. We talk about the culture. We talk about the vision of success. And we explain what's going to be necessary going forward. And we sit down and we agree on that. We say, okay, we're adults. We see eye to eye on this. Going forward, this is what we expect. Let me hear what you expect. And then we start over. And we've had great success. We have company officers in our organization now that weren't highly respected as firefighters, and they're some of our most respected company officers now because of mentoring and because of commitment of saying, okay, let's reestablish where we need to be, and let's head for that instead of just letting bad things continue to occur before we do anything about it.
Incredible stuff. The book, when is the book released?
As soon as I choose a cover, it's all ready to go to the printer. And so we're up to the cover. They tell me it'll be 6 weeks in printing. Everything's done. And so I'm hoping to finalize the cover by the end of the week, and it'll go to the printer. So six or 7 weeks from today, and that'll be put out by Penwell. Really excited about it. It's been a great experience.
Sir, I can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you for Birdman for putting in his 2 cents. I know you're going to be at Chesapeake Fire Conference.
Looking forward to that.
Maryland, October 21st and 23rd. Be teaching the leadership track with Captain Mike Dugan. I know there's several great other instructors there as well. Please go online, look it up. I still believe there are spots available. Is there anything else you want to leave with? Or
I just want to thank Sons of the Flag for all the work that you're doing for our veterans and for our firefighters. I'm relatively new to you guys, but everything I've seen, I'm excited about and pledging my support here publicly. But I think it's a great partnership. You put veterans and firefighters together, you can do just about anything. So I'm excited to see what the future looks like.
Amen to that, brother. Absolutely.
Once again, thank you for your support, and we
Thanks for having us on.
Really look forward to the book. Everybody check out Chief Scott Thompson and the Functional Fire Company.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you to our guest this evening. Make sure you check us out again on November 13th as we talk to Louisville firefighter and burn survivor Andy Allison. Also, be sure to follow Sons of the Flag on all social media at Sons of the Flag for upcoming information about our Stars and Stripes Film Festival going on November 6th through November 11th.